so much of our culture really does tell us that there's somebody outside of us that we're waiting for to come and complete us and make us whole. And so we've all sort of been wandering around with this idea that, I'm looking for my other half, like I'm half a person. And we also have a lot of these beliefs that we're broken somehow. And really, when we're operating from that place, there's no way that we're actually going to call in a healthy, aligned partner, because we don't know who we are and we don't know what we stand for.
I want everybody to know that this episode is one of the most important subject matters, period, because our relationships affect, I believe, every aspect of our lives. And it's kind of like the linchpin for our health, our mental health. Obviously, our success in life requires these relationships. And so, I just got to kick this off by sharing the first page. I was like, no, she didn't. You're just going to get right to the point. You said that when we operate from our past wounds or seek external fulfillment, we might approach dating and relationships as if they're a performance. We show up in whatever way we think will impress the other person or keep them interested. But we can't. Oh, this is so good. I'm going to show you this little thing that I drew. Okay. We show up in whatever way will impress the other person or keep them interested. But we can't win someone's love by pretending to be someone we're not. And I made this little action figure thing here. I know it kind of looks like a cup of tea, like a hot cup of coffee. That's actually a brain exploding emoji that I drew. I'm a terrible, small cartoon artist, but man, it's just like, it's getting right to the point. So let's unpack what this means, because immediately it just made me think about, in relationship context today, when folks are looking for love, in a sense, we have a representative that we put forward. And this is really getting to the heart of that.
Yeah. Well, and I think so much of our culture really does tell us that there's somebody outside of us that we're waiting for to come and complete us and make us whole. And so we've all sort of been wandering around with this idea that, I'm looking for my other half, like I'm half a person. And we also have a lot of these beliefs that we're broken somehow. And really, when we're operating from that place, there's no way that we're actually going to call in a healthy, aligned partner, because we don't know who we are and we don't know what we stand for. And so a lot of this book is really a reclaiming in relationship to self, and knowing that when our relationship to self is anchored in truth, then our relationships to everybody else will be anchored in truth, right? So it's that foundation that we live from.
That's facts. I'm wondering, and I think other people will wonder as well, this is called Becoming the One. I felt like some Neo vibes as well, but ultimately you bring about the fact that the most important relationship that we have or will ever have is the relationship we have with ourselves. Yeah. So can you share, why did you make that the emphasis of the book?
Well, like I said, there's so much media influence and cultural influence that tells us that we're waiting to find the one in order to be happy. But actually, it's the opposite. Until we are happy within ourselves and we recognize that we are whole, we won't be able to create those kinds of relationships that we want. So it's shifting from fantasy to reality, but in a really beautiful way, right? Because there's actually so much more magic in medicine that can happen when we're anchored in reality. And when we can say, here's who I am, here's what I stand for, here's what I value. And we go out into the world from that place where we're emanating our essence. And then the right people can really come into our lives. And I had so many experiences through childhood and growing up in really dysfunctional, chaotic environments that shaped my experience of love and relationship to be really chaotic and dysfunctional. You could almost not even call it love, right? It's just repeating trauma patterns. And it's been such a huge journey for me to figure out, okay, what is at the heart of this? If I really want to be in relationship, if I really want to experience love and family and connection, what's in the way? And so much of that for all of us is really our past wounding, our stories, our walls, our guards, all of the defenses that we've built to protect our hearts, because along the way we learned that that's what we had to do. And I think ultimately relationship is the greatest gift, right? Like, we're literally here to be in relationship. If we're not in relationship, what are we here for?
Yeah.
Like, we know that our health improves when we're in relationship. We know that one of the leading causes of depression is loneliness. And that's not just to say romantic relationship. This is just friendship, family connection, community. Like, it's literally wired into us. We need it to survive. And yet we don't prioritize it, or we approach it very nonchalantly. Like, we just fall into relationship. Your life partner, your romantic partner, that is such a big decision, right? But we don't actually set a foundation for that. We don't prepare. And I want to change that.
Yeah, that's power. Like the way you even said that, it's remarkable, because we abandon logic in a sense when we're doing the relationship thing, and love has its own logic, emotion has its own logic. And this is even speaking to the communication and connection that we have just within our species, like some of the conflicts that I might have with my wife, which, she's my best friend, she's amazing. But it's me, I tend to be very logical and like analytical, and just, that's just how I roll. And, she might have something that I'm just like, that's not logical. But using that language with her, and also me saying that, ultimately, if I really want to pick this apart, that's not a logical statement for me to say it's not logical, because her emotion has a logic to it, and so, but I think it's kind of like we fall, like you said, we fall into it. We fall in love. Are you going to get up though? Like, it's just like, so coming into it as more of a complete person, and this is what you're really advocating, because I think that, and let's talk about this, one of the things that folks experience consistently is this pattern, like you even said the word pattern, of being in the same type of relationship or attracting the same type of people. It might not be exactly the same, but the same trauma pattern. So let's talk a little bit more about that, specifically what a trauma pattern is.
Yeah, well, most of us have a script that we're living out, right? We're running on a story that we either inherited or that we began to create when we were very young. And usually that conditioning is happening in our first family environments, right? What are we observing about love and about connection and about communication and safety? And, are we safe to express ourselves? Are we not? All of these things. And we eventually, we become adults, or at least we have adult bodies. And
Right.
and then we end up in, these romantic partnerships where, we don't realize it, but we're actually wanting to resolve some old wounds. We're wanting to get complete on some of those things. And especially we're wanting to be seen, heard, and understood in the ways that we didn't feel like we were when we were young. And the challenge is that when we attract partners, they almost always mirror our wounds, and they're usually opposite to us in some way. Like, even, how you're talking about you and Anne. And of course, Ben and I are the same. It's like, I'm more emotional, he's more logical. So it's like he's more head, I'm more heart, but we have to come together and understand that. And ultimately, these are containers for growth. But what happens is that we just play out these patterns where we see our partners as our enemies. And that sounds really extreme, and people will be like, I don't think that. But it's like, look back at your past relationships. How many of those ended catastrophically? And did you blame them for everything? Or how many relationships have we ended because we felt like there was just something wrong with that partner and we were out looking for the one, right? Because, oh, you're just not the one. And really, these are trauma patterns that are playing out. And again, too, a lot of the times we can experience things like repeated rejection or abandonment, or everything will feel like abandonment because we're conditioned for that. And that was a big part of my story, right? The abandonment wound and that awakening around it was what catalyzed this entire journey for me. And maybe later I'll tell a story about that, because you were a part of that, actually. Like, I called you when I was in that.
I remember, like, even that there was a connective tissue there, for me to even receive that call. But yeah, I know you, but to actually know you in these pages was just like, it really, I felt it. And I actually felt, I think a lot of people have that similar thing in some kind of like in it. So the emotion hit because it exists in me too. Yeah. So can you share that? Let's share where that abandonment, the root of it was for you.
Yeah. For me, it was, my story is long, so I'm gonna summarize here, but when I was born, my mom, she was 22 and she was struggling with very complex PTSD from childhood trauma of her own and severe mental illness. I never met my father. Our first debut into the world was being snuck out of the back door of the hospital at 2 a.m. Because we were on the run. And so, I often say like, I'm a runner, but it's not a joke. It's like, it's in my nervous system. It's like, I'm still working out that pattern in life. And so when I was 3, my mom dropped me off at a foster home in the middle of the night. She just kind of packed me up and then took me to this house, and I didn't know where I was. And then she drove away. And I just remember like screaming and yelling. And then, other things happened in that environment that, caused trauma for me. And then, throughout my life, sometimes I'd be with my mom and then sometimes I'd be back in foster homes for long periods of time, or she would get sick and I didn't know, and she would be in the hospital, getting treatment for 6 months at a time, and I wouldn't see her. I'd just get dropped off at some stranger's house and she would be gone.
And you really loved her.
I did. I love her, and I'm so grateful to her for this life. And at the time, I didn't understand what was going on, and I just really, I wanted my mom. And so when I was around 12, I kind of got into trouble. I was the AWOL kid. There was a police officer assigned to my case. I got a birthday card from my police officer, they knew me in that town that I lived in.
Yeah.
And I was known by social services as the AWOL kid, because it was like I was never where I was supposed to be. I was always running away.
Wow. People would never know that if they see you,
No.
like, wow.
No, and that's the thing, is that we don't really know people's stories until we really like open our hearts to them, But yeah, it was a wild time. Like, I was drinking and doing drugs and partying, and by the time I was 16, I was out on my own working 2 jobs and homeschooling myself. But yeah, that's like that story of abandonment. So you can see how like I was destined to attract chaos in my relationships, and I had no foundation for what healthy love looked like, or no understanding that I could consciously choose a partner based on my values, because I was living in survival mode, like so many of us. And so we end up in these relationships that are just all we know, right? It's where our nervous system is vibing at. And so I remember when I was in my early 20s and I went through a divorce, and it ended in betrayal, and my cat disappeared, and my ex at the time just took off with someone else. I lost everything, all my business, my money, everything. And then to top it off, my abandonment wound was so triggered. Like, I was so back in that state of being 3 years old that I gained like 25 or 30 pounds in a matter of a month. I went and got my hormones tested. I had none left. All I had running in my body was cortisol. I broke out in like a rash and acne, like all over my body. My face was swollen. Like, I'd wake up in the morning and I couldn't open my eyes. Like, I was sick, and it was so much my wounding. It was like I hadn't let myself feel all of the pain that I had buried so deeply. Like, I had never felt pain in my life. Like, I just bypassed it all until that moment. And then it all came, and my body couldn't handle it. And I remember calling you. I was like, I need help. Like, what do I do? Like, give me a diet plan or a workout plan. And you gave me some funny advice too at that time. And I was just about to meet Ben as well at that time. But yeah, I was really grateful to have, friends that I could call to support me through that. But it was just really incredible to see how much the body can respond to our traumas and our pain. And, those are patterns that will keep playing out until we do something about them. We have to do the work so that we can enter into a healthier dynamic.
That's so powerful. I mean, I love this another thing that you talked about in the book that was just like, I stopped for a moment and just sat with it, is that, during these times, it's actually one of our greatest opportunities. It's like a great gift, because that the wound is so sensitive. You're willing to do something. It's like an opening for action potential, because you want to get better. It's very much like a physical problem, a health crisis. When we have a traumatic issue in our personal relationships, there's an opening there for us to take action. Because when things are rolling along, this is not the time you're going to do the inner work necessary to, heal your abandonment issues that are causing just repetition and pain and continuous problems. You're just kind of chucking along through life. But when something happens, when there's a break, it's like an opportunity. So same thing with the health crisis. Oftentimes we're just skating through life until boom, you're never going to be out of pain again. That was my diagnosis. You're going to be in pain for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
You'll never walk normally again, or you have cancer. Whatever the diagnosis might be for somebody, that oftentimes sparks the opportunity. That's when people want to do something about it.
Yeah.
So I'm saying this for folks that are listening that are dealing with heartbreak, or that have heartbreak that is imminent coming up. Like that's an opportunity. It's an opening for change. And that's really what happened with you.
Yeah. And you're so right. It really is that pivotal moment, whether it's the health crisis or the emotional crisis or all of them all at once. I think as humans, there's something about crisis that really cracks us open. And it's in those moments of shatter that we are ready, So when I get women coming to me who are at their rock bottom, as much as I can hold that tenderness and be empathetic, I'm also excited, because I'm like, you're ready and you have no idea, like you have to go through this dark tunnel right now, and it's going to be painful as hell and it's going to suck. And on the other side of this, you're going to know yourself more deeply. Like you're going to have everything you need to create the life you actually want to create, because you haven't self-abandoned, because when we hit these moments of loss or of breakup, or we're just so tired of hitting that same wall in our patterns over and over again, we really do have a choice. Like there's always a choice, and a lot of us will choose to numb it out. Like we'll just go binge Netflix, we'll just eat everything in sight, we'll use substances, shopping, all of those things. And I've done those things too. And we can also go into it. And we can kind of let it take us, right? We can just surrender to it and just go into the abyss and let it transform us. And if we take the path of numbing, chances are, we'll find somebody new, and for a time they're going to look really exciting to us, and they're going to be the one. And then maybe 3 months, maybe 6 months, maybe a year and a half later, what do you know? We're right back where we started. And the illusion of the one is once again shattered. And that's what happens when we just don't want to take a look at how our patterns are showing up in our lives, versus, we do it a little bit more consciously. And yes, you're still going to have the illusion shattered. No relationship's perfect. But chances are you'll have called in a partner who's willing to ride those waves with you, because you rode those waves first.
Yeah. Oh man, surfboard.
Totally.
This reminds me of another thing that you talked about, which is essentially, in our relationships, for the average person, it's on the job training.
Yeah.
Like we are showing up already seemingly fractured. We don't realize the wholeness that we are, and we're just kind of, we're kind of crash test dummies for ourselves. And running into this person, running into that person, and figuring stuff out along the way. But ultimately, when you finally achieve lasting happiness is when you realize that you literally don't need someone to say or to do something for you to be okay.
Exactly.
Often in the world right now, we want the other person. We want the person to just say what we want, do what we want. We might lie to ourselves and say that's not the case. And we really... And I've done this as well, which is we just want them to say the thing, and I also feel like I shouldn't have to tell you what I want you to say, and it's because of this very romanticized programming that we get. Let's talk about that.
Well, it's seeing relationship as something to give to us versus a container in which we are growing together. I give the example of a power grid versus a vacuum. In a vacuum relationship, we're just taking it all, and then where does it go? Nothing comes back unless the vacuum's broken, and then you want to throw it out, right? You don't want a vacuum spitting all of its crap back out. Or you have a power grid where you're both creating this abundance of energy, and then it's giving to the community. And I see a relationship that is on purpose as something that is fueling us both to be more of service. because that's really ultimately why we're here, is to be of service to our fellow humans. And so I think relationship really has to be about truth and about honoring ourselves and seeing love as a container for growth, rather than, validate me, give me what I want, tell me what I want to hear, lose yourself in me essentially, and let me lose myself in you, so that we can become this like little glob, moving through the world, which isn't really that healthy. In a healthy relationship, you're inevitably going to have conflict. You're inevitably going to have difference, because if you're being true to yourself, you're not always going to agree. You're not going to be the same. And there's medicine in that. Like, we can balance each other out. We can learn things from each other. We can expand our perspectives. We can heal. And the media doesn't really demonstrate that very well. And most of us didn't grow up in environments where that was the case. There's often these unconscious contracts in family systems where everybody agrees to play a certain role. And if you try to step out of that role, you're not welcome, or you're put back into your place. You've got the quiet one, the scapegoat, the loud one, the bad one, all of these roles. And then in the media, it's like, what do you see? You see this intense, hot passion that's also totally disturbed. It's like chaotic roller coaster. And so we're kind of conditioned to think that healthy love is boring, when actually I think boring can be really nice. Like what we think of boring love, like for me, like, just the day-to-day being with a partner that you love, enjoying life and being able to celebrate the small little moments, to me, that's highest success in relationship. It's about remembering that it's not about these big extravagant rushes. It's about allowing yourself to experience happiness and contentment day to day.
That's what actual life is.
Yeah.
Like a successful relationship. That's what it is. But we don't see that glorified. When you mentioned media in our examples, I thought about, like, it just came rushing into my head, all of these Disney movies where we have the person who needs to be rescued and the rescuer. The rescuee and the rescuer relationship, and how we're programming our children. Like, if you want this relationship, you're going to have to rescue her. You're her rescuer. You're her savior.
Yeah.
And for, the other side, it's just, like, you have to find that person who's going to save you from your demons, from whatever you've been through. And man, that is crazy. Like, it's freaking me out.
Yeah.
It's in so many movies.
I know. And I love all of those old Disney movies. Like, when I was a kid, I loved them all. And I also see how, like, the conditioning there is really rough. I'm like, I don't think I'm gonna put that on for my kids, because just the patterns that we're learning from those movies is, we see it in our reality now. And that's another part of self-abandonment that we don't really talk about very often, is how so many people are conditioned to save and to rescue and to leave their center to make somebody else feel better. But ultimately, that can be a really selfish act as well, because we're just trying to get rid of our own anxiety of, like, what's it going to feel like if I have to say no to this person and they're going to be upset with me? Or what will I have to feel inside of myself if I don't focus all of my energy on trying to fix or caretake this person, and instead I have to focus on what's going on right here and now? And I can really identify with that, right? Because from the moment I was like 2 years old, I was caretaking my mother. Like, she'd come home and she would be, drunk, and I would make a bed for her on the bathroom floor and, like, bring a cookie sheet with toothpaste and, a toothbrush, and, like, want to brush her teeth for her. And so all my life, all I knew was caretaking. So, of course, I attracted partners who played the helpless role. And I played this, like, I've got it all together. I'll take care of everything. But ultimately, those types of dynamics, they usually end in betrayal, because if we're in this helpless, rescuer dynamic, the person who's playing that helpless role, they have no choice but to eventually try to individuate from you. And how does that usually end up, right? They have to go out and find themselves, and oftentimes it ends in a really painful way. And then you're like, oh, but I gave everything to you. Like, I took care of you. Like, how could you do this to me? But like the higher thing would have been to just say, you know what, I see you're struggling right now and I know you're going to figure it out. I trust you. I love you. I'm here. But like, I'm not going to save you. And I think we got to learn how to do that more in relationship if we really want to empower each other instead of enable each other.
There isn't a Disney movie for this yet.
No, we'll
but
have to write one.
You know, and by the way, I don't want folks to be like, we can't watch Cinderella now, Shawn. Absolutely, you can watch Cinderella, but now it can spark a conversation. You can have context. Don't just put the thing on for your kid to like have that go deep into their psyche and without any context. You know, but you know, it's wonderful to see how things are evolving right now. And like I said, I really do believe that this is the most important subject matter for us to be talking about, even though like currently worldwide we're experiencing what appears to be on the surface a health issue, but this is all of the dissonance is really the undergirding aspect is disrupted relationships with people who are hurting themselves, and people who are, you know, they're operating in relationships where they're creating, you know, inclusion of certain people but the exclusion of others, and all these other principles that are really based on fear. You know, and until we get healthier relationships, help to generate healthier humans, we're going to keep falling into these same patterns. And because of your book, it sparked a whole, like, for hours I went into this rabbit hole of research. And, you know, I've kind of like flirted with it years ago. Like, it's there in my mental Rolodex, but I'm just like, oh no, I've got to check out where we at. Where are we with the science on this now? This was published in Neuropsychopharmacology, and they were looking at the environmental influence of our past trauma that is getting passed along to our offspring. And the data is thick on it now. Like literally the stuff you're going through and not addressing, it's getting passed on not to just to your offspring, but to their offspring. And this particular study, they also were uncovering that positive experiences help to nullify those things and helps you to pass on, you know, healthier genetic imprints for your kids as well. So it's not like you went through stuff in your life and it's been a lot of bad stuff. I'm going to pass this on to my kid. There's nothing I can do about it. You can do something about it right now by focusing on healing. And, you know, this is just one of the many things that you covered in the book. And I want to ask you about this. You said in the book, you were talking about how our bodies and minds need to integrate the truth that we are capable of creating healthy relationships, regardless of what we've experienced or witnessed in our lives. So we have to have that integrated into our body. What do you mean by that?
Well, it's interesting that you brought up that study, because that's something that I've gone deep into as well. Because, you know, for anyone who has had family trauma or past trauma, and I'm sure you can relate to this, like having kids can be scary because you want to protect them from everything. You want them to have such a better life than you had. And ultimately, the best thing that we can do is heal ourselves. So many of us, we are afraid that deep down we're broken and that there's nothing that we can do, or that we can't heal, or that we're the exception. And so a lot of times that's because we're focused so much on, you know, mindset and positivity and empowerment work. And I'm not saying that there's no place for that. Of course there is. There's a place for that in my life, you know, in my early days, you know, 10 years ago when I got started, like that's where I started out. But my patterns weren't changing, because in the body and in the deep depths of my psyche, I still believed that I was broken and unworthy in some way. And so we have to go slow, right? We can't just like overwhelm ourselves with all of this positivity. We can't bypass by just telling ourselves that we're going to manifest what we want. We actually also have to nurture our bodies to accept that it's okay to move forward. And so in somatic work, we know that the tissues in the nervous system actually store memory and store information. And so simple things, even like noticing how you feel when something happens in a traumatizing situation and actually moving the way that your body wants to move, or, air punching and kicking, or, going for a run if all of a sudden your body feels like moving. These are the things that we do to move through our experiences rather than just holding onto them in the body. You see it like an animal, they like shake a lot. Like I notice, my dog Bodhi, whenever he has like any type of stressful situation, he shakes right away. And we're always like, yeah, shake it off. Just get rid of that stress. But we have learned to sort of freeze and self-protect. And of course, that's a valid survival instinct as well. Though eventually we need to find a way to move that trauma out of the body. So I often talk about somatic experiencing work for that, where you work with a practitioner and they actually help you hands-on, like holding your kidneys and holding your organs and letting your body release. And I've had crazy experiences doing that, like laying on a table and someone's holding my kidneys and I'm actually feeling cramping and pulsing and releasing. And then all of a sudden I'm actually hearing and seeing what pattern is being released from that organ. Not everybody's going to have that kind of experience. A lot of people go and they don't really feel anything on the table, but after they notice changes. So there's no right way to experience it. But it's very important to remember that our bodies are intelligent and to keep moving. So I often say, go for walks, be in nature and really let yourself feel safety again, relearn what it means to feel safe. And instead of trying to trick yourself into feeling safe.
Yeah. That's obviously that's super easy to fall into today, because there's so much, positivity messaging. Obviously, it's trying to counter all the negative messaging.
Totally.
So the intention is of a higher frequency, but the truth is it can be very superficial. Like we've got to be able to embody the fact that we can be ourselves.
Yeah.
Like that can take some serious integration and serious work, because we've been essentially indoctrinated that you have to put on a performance and you got to be somebody else that you're not.
Yeah.
Especially in the context of a relationship. Like I said at the very beginning, you have a representative that you're presenting, and that's the person that you're wanting to hook up with. They're meeting your representative.
Totally.
They're not even meeting you.
Yeah.
Because you've read some articles like you got to play these little, do this little thing or whatever, or, of course, just hiding out from the world because of whatever you might have been through in your life. So giving yourself the grace to know that, integrating this into your body where you really know, that that you matter, that you are significant, and you don't need someone else to affirm it.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you about, you mentioned that somewhere along the way, a lot of people learn that they have to sacrifice themselves in order to be loved. And this kind of goes hand in hand with what I was just talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so many of us have learned that, right? Like I said, in our family systems, in the culture that we live in workplaces, it's like we're doing the thing that we think we need to do to get paid or to get approval or to, get validated in some way. And, especially, for those of us who grew up in tumultuous family environments, usually there were parts of ourselves that we were not allowed to show or share in order to stay safe. Right? And a lot of times that's our emotional side or our anger, which is our boundaries. So how many of us learned that we can't set boundaries, right? Because it's too dangerous. I mean, we've just internalized that, right? And so we're literally self-abandoning every time we're in a relationship because we don't have that tether to, it's okay to say no. And I'm allowed to ask for what I want. And my needs are also important, And so we see a lot of people in relationship where they're saying, oh, my relationships don't get past 3 months, or, I keep getting cheated on, or, they keep getting bored and then just ghosting. And of course, there's lots going on with the person who's on, the other end of that. No doubt. This isn't a blame game. But my question is always, were you showing up fully expressed? Like, were you showing them your truth, your anger? Like, were you being boundaried? Because in my experience, when a person shows up fully authentic and they know who they are, and they have boundaries, and they have things that they love and that they're passionate about, we're just drawn to those people, right? We're just like magnetically drawn in. Versus when you can feel that a person isn't being truthful, or that they're holding back, or that, you know, they don't feel like they belong, you know, then you can feel that too. And so we really have to look at the ways that we are not honoring ourselves in order to try to get love. Because the kind of love that we're going to get when we're selling out like that, it's not real. If you have to change who you are, if you have to put on a mask, you know, if you have to dim your light in order to be accepted, like, that's not the kind of relationship you want. And I'll tell you, the kind of partner that you do want is the kind of partner that's going to get turned on by your no, and by your fire, and by your edges. You know, I think we all like a little challenge. And a good, healthy relationship should challenge you. It shouldn't be easy all the time. It shouldn't always be yes, you know, and there should be some negotiation. And I think that's part of what keeps the spark going, is both of us showing up truthful, even when that means that there might be conflict.
That's beautiful. Like, that's another thing that we don't see modeled, is the fact that real people in the real world, conflict is a natural part of, especially a relationship where you're in close context and content with each other all the time. You're going to have moments of dissonance, and that's actually good, because what we would expect based on our programming is that this relationship, if it's good, it just stays that way, right? Happily ever after. That's what we're taught, instead of understanding that a really great relationship requires growth.
Yes.
You've got to get better, you know, and using those opportunities. You just tripped me out when you said that anger being that the expression of boundaries.
Yeah.
In my childhood, in my atmosphere, it was all anger. It was all anger all the time.
Yeah.
So that led to the opposite position, where I'm not letting people in because my boundaries.
Yeah.
Why are you doing this? You got me, like, this is tripping me out, you know? And so when I finally met, after all of the you know, not letting people in, and all of the, you know, the people along the way, when I finally met Anne, I was just in a position where I realized something, and I realized a triggering event when I was a kid. You know, my first quote girlfriend, like official girlfriend.
Yeah.
You know, I was a football player. She's a cheerleader. You know, we had the whole storybook type thing going.
Yeah.
But, you know, a lot of drama happened in our lives, like personal lives, outside the context of ourselves. It's kind of like a safe haven. But, you know, she even, like, her house blew up. Like, it's such a crazy thing for me to even say this, you know, but she lived pretty close to the school that we went to. She wasn't there. You know, she wasn't there that day, and she had 3 brothers. She lost 2 of her brothers, and the other one was badly burned. And, you know, so going through that as a kid, I'm like 15 years old, 14, dealing with that, and like, how do you support? And other things were going on too, but eventually, like, her mom was wanting a clean slate. She moved them to another state, and, you know, kind of fractured our thing. And so it's just like, but even through that, we had turbulence. And I just felt like I can't love somebody again, like, and have me so broken, you know. But I didn't realize it at the time, and I was just like, honestly, I was like, I'm done with love. I'm not gonna put myself in this position again. Already, my boundaries were there, but I let this person in, and so for the next 5, 7, 8 years or whatever it was, I was all boundaries. And then I realized. And this is when I was working on myself, getting myself healthier, and getting myself healthier in my thinking as well, because my physical transformation that took place, it was also a big result of my mental transformation.
Totally.
And I realized that if I'm going to I had a great model for a snippet of my life, which was my grandparents. And that imprint was there. And if I was going to have a love like that, I had to let somebody in, you know? And so I just happened to meet her at that time. Wow. Because if she jokes about it, like, if I would have met her a year earlier, like, it would have been here today, God today. But I was just like, I'm in, you know? And willing to do the work necessary. And so she had to deal with also that boundary thing
Yeah.
that I still had, of course.
Yeah.
And for her and her culture is the opposite. Like, you don't express anger.
Yeah.
So guess what's going to happen if I'm just being a little fiery? You know, it's just like, it's a big deal.
Totally.
Where I'm just like, I'm just talking. Like, this is just how we talk. And now, like, it's melded. We've evolved to where I'm less of that, you know. And I have it, though. I have it on tap if I need it.
bet
But not
you do.
in the in the context with her.
Yeah.
And she's become more. Like, she's opened her, and even invited her mom into the, you know, like her mom talking you
Yeah.
know, and which is just amazing to see. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
You know, and but to see that all of our emotions have value and they're healthy and they're helpful,
Yes.
you know, guiding us to where we want to be. So thank you for bringing that out, because I
Yeah.
never really thought about it in that context
Well,
before.
and I love that you shared that story too, because that's such a good example of how we heal together in relationship and how we also attract people who have the opposite wounding, right? Like for you, anger was like, that's the thing. And for her, it was like no anger. And so what you expressed there was that you guys really taught each other something because you alchemized those lessons. And now she's probably got a little bit more fire and you have a little more water. Just like you bring in those elements in, and that there's a difference between boundaries and walls. Like we want to have boundaries, but we don't want to like keep people out. We don't need like an electric fence around our hearts.
Right.
Even though I get why we would have those, you know.
A nice moat.
Yeah.
Get a nice moat going. You need a drawbridge to get in. So, you know, and just as a little caveat too, because I want folks to realize that, you know, if you've had difficult circumstances in your childhood or even in adulthood,
Yeah.
you are the norm. You are normal.
Yes.
Because folks who have a healthy modeling as a child growing up, and you talk about this as well, that's the exception, not the rule. And for those folks, that's beautiful. Like, embrace that. There's no need to be like, well, I'm not a part of this conversation because I had a great childhood and a great modeling from my parents. What we want to do is encourage more of that. Take what you know, express more, keep that healthy modeling going, and understand what you're giving to your offspring. And, you know, it's a beautiful thing. So I just want to share that little tidbit. But I want to talk about, because you get very granular in things, and a healthy relationship or a healthy inner relationship, and you outline what some of these ingredients are in building that healthy inner relationship. And I want to go through a few of these. One of them is building confidence and self-trust. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. When we don't believe in ourselves, when we don't trust our inner instincts and our red flag, you know, gut messages where something feels off or something doesn't feel right, then we're more likely to allow situations that are not serving our highest good. You know, when we aren't confident, when we think that we're less than, we're more likely to draw in people who will take advantage of us or who will, you know, belittle us and not see us in our highest light. And again, it's tough with this stuff sometimes because people might hear that and think that, oh, it's my fault that I was victimized, but that's never the case. That's never what we're talking about. But what I am saying is that the energy that we're carrying and the beliefs that we're carrying about ourselves are going to show up in the people that we let into our lives. And we have to be able to trust our bodies, to trust our guts, and to really be connected to ourselves so that we can say no when we need to say no, right? Like a classic example is somebody who really wants to be in a relationship. If you really want to be in a relationship, but you don't think you're worthy or you don't think you're good enough or you don't have confidence to listen to your body, then you might just say yes to anyone who walks through the door, right? Because maybe you don't think anyone else is going to choose you, versus knowing who you are and having the confidence and the clarity to qualify a person. So it's like going from the being in the seat of waiting to be chosen versus I'm the chooser here, right? So I'm going to choose whether or not this is a relationship that I want to engage in, versus going to a date and saying, oh, I hope they think I'm pretty and I hope they like me and, you know, I hope I don't say the wrong thing so that they'll want to be with me. How do you even know if you want to be with this person? You haven't asked any questions. You haven't qualified them, right? Do they align? And so I really invite people to tune into their bodies and to really listen. Like, how does your body feel right now when you're with this person? Like, do you feel relaxed? Do you feel constricted? Like, is it easy for you to laugh together? You know, like, how in yourself are you right now? Or have you just left the building? And so that's really one of the first things that we want to take a look at, you know, if we're in that process of looking for partnership.
I feel that life finds a way, and there's always going to be conditions that help to bring out the qualities necessary, literally down to the very essence of what life is on this planet. And right now we're experiencing a massive issue where there's so much disruption and people have a gut feeling about what's happening in the world, and outside forces are saying don't listen to that, you know, suppress that. We've had multiple examples, of course, through our experience here on planet Earth, but a big example is happening now, because I think that in recent decades the greatest capacity that we have, or one of the greatest capacities we have as humans, is to be able to listen to that inner guidance system, which is like the most important thing. It's like your internal navigation. And we see that in other species. We're like, oh, those birds know how to do a great triangle. Like, you know, like everything else knows what to do except us.
Yeah.
And nothing could be further from the truth. We got to this point because we're able to listen to our intuition, our instincts. And so now we're getting a chance to rise up and to really listen to our inner guidance system and stop negating it, and also stop, you know, when that is coming up, when we're getting that gut feedback, to try to logically ignore it or logically talk yourself out of it. So, you know, I think it's a necessary thing. So I believe that all that's happening in the world right now is just because it's a balancing act.
Yeah.
You know, it's like some crazy stuff going on. Did you see that underwater explosion, the volcano erupting? They could see it from space. Did you see that thing?
No.
A few people that I've talked to haven't seen it. It was like here today, gone today news. Like literally they can see the explosion from space, and it was massive. It like sent ripples around the globe.
Wow.
Right? And so like maybe that's something to be concerned about versus our little problem, you know, just like this little tiny thing is happening in our life, but it seems like it's gripping and it's so important, and it's like my life is falling apart, and it's minuscule compared to the grander scheme of things, you know, and the beauty and the balance that life has. So I'm saying all that to say that, you know, I think that, man, your book is so important right now. And I'm not just saying this, like truly, because it's directing us to the most important work. It makes all the rest of this stuff outside of us work. So being able to listen to our gut is your next point here, which is, how do we do that? How do we build a healthy inner relationship? Take time for yourself. Talk about that.
Yeah. Well, you know, just on your last point, which leads to this so beautifully, is how domesticated we've become, right? Like we're so domesticated. We're so conditioned to like be in our comfy little boxes with all of our technology and constant distractions and anything to sort of take us out of our bodies and to disconnect from ourselves, right? So we're like connecting, but we're disconnected all the time. And so reconnecting is really stepping outside of that domestication. Like you're talking about animals. I mean, there's such a beautiful example. It's just a reason I live in the forest, right? Because most of my time is spent outside walking in the forest. Like that's where I feel the most alive and connected. And if we all took more time to be in nature, to be just with ourselves, to just be quiet and let our bodies speak to us, we would feel more human again. You know, and so much of our world is just constructed around distraction now, and we're losing our way. You know, we're losing our way because we're living in our heads. Like we're talking about like putting chips in our heads now. And, you know, whatever, some people think that's a great idea. I'm not going to be doing that. I don't need a virtual world to live in. I have a real world to live in. You know, there's real, you know, animals and plants to tend to. I don't need to live in some crazy metaverse, you know, and whatever. Like there's multiple sides to this, but I just think it's interesting how we're always looking for escape instead of just being with ourselves. Like, we don't have the capacity to be in our bodies anymore. And so how can we really be with another person? How can we have the capacity to hear each other's stories, like what you and I are doing now? Like, imagine people who don't take the time to be quiet with themselves, or they haven't taken the time to feel their past and, you know, their traumas. You wouldn't be able to listen to my stories and to empathize and to ask the questions that you're asking unless you had gone into those things for yourself. And so it's like deepening our capacity to be with ourselves deepens our capacity to be with others. Right. It's just a given. So if we want to have, like you're talking about, a healthier world where we can have conversations again and be curious instead of defensive and, you know, ask big questions, then we have to be able to do that within ourselves too.
Yeah. Facts. It's again, it seems so simple. We know that this requires work, but you know, right now we are existing in a time where we are not, for most people, they are never by themselves. Like there's always, in the moments that you're alone, to just be, to just be. Yeah. We got a device, right? You know, you don't just sit there anymore. We pick up our phones. And, you know, the crazy thing is, again, like life imitating art or art imitating life, but some things are kind of foreshadowed and it's becoming more apparent. Yeah. Like, you know, I mentioned, you know, like Neo earlier, just a little joke, but seriously, we're in a way jacked into the matrix. When you pick up that phone, you are leaving reality and you're going into this false reality that is, in every sense of the word, it is false. It's not, it's like a fraction of the truth, the bigness of things. And you get like a version of reality that is outpictured to you. And, you know, this is a huge issue, especially for our children, because they're growing up in this. And it's not an accident that we are in the state that we're in, where we're so disconnected. Like, we have epidemics of depression. We have epidemics of every chronic disease you can name. Like, these things just didn't exist decades ago. And so it's all hand in hand. We can't target one specific thing, but this is definitely a big part. So taking time for yourself. How can we do that though? I mean, you mentioned, for example, you live in the forest, so you can go and get, you know, shout out to Shinrin Yoku, which is forest bathing. We've got some great peer-reviewed evidence on how healing and supportive of healthy genetic expression being in nature is, right? Forest bathing, right? So what if we don't have that? That's not a part of our life. What can we start to do to be with ourselves?
Yeah, I mean, I have this meditation that I created. It's called the Healing Your Inner Child meditation. And it was a meditation that I took myself through for like a year when I was learning how to self-soothe and feel more secure in myself. And that's free. Like, you just get it on my website. That's actually one way to practice if it's really foreign for you to slow down and be in your body, or you feel panic at the idea, then, you know, listen to a guided audio, or, you know, go on YouTube and find a guided audio and put on your headphones and just actually practice that way. Like, that's okay to do. I always suggest finding ways to date yourself, you know, like go for a meal on your own, or prepare a meal for yourself if you're on your own. You know, if you only cook nice meals when you have guests, like what would it be like to just cook a nice meal for yourself, or, you know, bring home a flower for yourself, you know, and to really romance yourself again, really like provide that nurturing base within your own heart. And another thing is actually bringing in plants into your space. I mean, obviously we know that that's really good for air quality and all of that, but, you know, plants really do resonate at a pretty high frequency. They respond to loving energy or to negative energy, and they thrive in a space of love. And I invite people to, you know, bring nature into your home. If you live in a city and you don't have nature around you, like bring in some plants, you know, and bring that around you so that at least you can have that connection. It's just like the little things that we can do to reconnect and to be okay with, you know, sometimes being on our own and not distracting from it, but really learning how to enjoy it. And it's hard to do that when we're suppressing a lot of pain. And so there's also this process of taking it very slow. Like if you're in the process of going to therapy and going through some of your deepest wounds, for a time it might be hard for you to be alone. Maybe you need to be with people all the time in order to feel okay. You know, maybe you just need to try going for a walk on your own, you know, and that's as far as you can get, which is fine. You build your capacity as you go.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Before we go any further, I also want to mention that we have a furry friend here.
Yes.
Just in case anybody hears any tiptoeing along, you have Bodhi here with us. So just share a little bit about Bodhi.
Oh, I could talk all day about Bodhi. Bodhi's my 8-pound Malshi. He's a Shih Tzu Maltese. And he is a nervous system healer. And I think it was Tim Ferriss who said, like, getting a dog was the best thing he ever did for his mental health. Like, he's talked about it on his podcast too. And I have not experienced anything like the bond that I have with this little guy. He's very connected, very aware, and he's such a mirror of energy.
This is nuts. Literally, Bodhi's been laying here with his head down for the past 20 minutes. As soon as we started this conversation, he just stared right into my soul, just looked up at me. That's bananas.
I know this sounds so funny, but I think he's a reincarnated monk. And the funny thing is that apparently Shih Tzus were temple dogs in Tibet.
Wow.
And it's interesting because the moment I picked him up, when he was 4 weeks old and I held him, the moment I held him, his name came. It was Bodhi right away. And I just knew there was something special about him. Like, all of his siblings are bonkers. It's really interesting. And he like doesn't bark. He's just in a zen space most of the time, except for if you're playing, you know, ball or stick. And I'm going to say that quietly. And he's just such a good friend to me. And having animals that we can connect with and bond with is such a beautiful relationship. And it's such a natural thing for us humans, like, to be in relationship with animals. And one thing that I've noticed in having a dog is when you have a dog and you're walking down the street, everybody wants to talk to you. And I always think, isn't it strange that when we're walking down the street without one, nobody talks to us, but when we have an animal with us, everybody. And so they're just like an opener, you know? And so it's like, if you're feeling lonely and you can have a pet, like a little dog or something, that's a really great way to actually get to know the community. It's a great way to make friends and even just going, you know, little dog meetups and stuff, which I do.
Oh my goodness. You know, I never thought about that before. That is so true.
Yeah.
You know, I see people walking along. I'm an observer for sure. Yeah. And, you know, I see folks and, you know, there's a dog temperament. You know, there's a certain state that our pets can have as well. And you see two people walking opposite directions with their pets and they're about to meet.
Yeah.
And the dogs, they're going for each other to check each other out, you know. But then sure enough, the dog parents start talking to each other as well.
Yeah.
Which would not have happened had they not had their dogs along with them. That's really remarkable. Really remarkable. Really, I don't know if it's like a signal, like I have the capacity to love.
Yeah.
Or whatever it might be. You know, I have the capacity to be open and friendly. You know, it's kind of like you said, it's like a sign. But this point of being able to take time for yourself, another little insight I want to add is that if we can just remove the seducer a little bit more, you know, which is our phone.
Yeah.
You know, find a strategy. You know, for me, it's in the morning, which I've seen myself. I know about this stuff, but if I'm hopping for I'm just let me just knock this thing out real quick first thing in the morning, it pulls me into the portal. Versus like literally I leave my phone somewhere else. I don't touch it because once I even touch it, like it's just like the neurochemistry there, that neuroassociation is there. So maybe it's first thing in the morning, you know, you just don't pick up your phone for 30 minutes. Or, you know, some folks literally just like leave it in their car. You know, one of my friends, when he would get home in the evening, he would just leave his phone in the car.
That's smart.
You know, because he knew, like, and he was getting pulled away. He had a growing family. He had like 4 kids now, and he saw the disruption that it created. So if you want healthier relationships with yourself and others, we can put this device like find a creative way to give yourself some time without it.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ben and I talked about, when we're home, like we're traveling right now, so we just need a phone all the time. And I don't want to leave without a phone. I'll get lost. But, when we're home, just having, that one day a week on Sundays where, Saturday night you put your phone in a drawer and you lock it and you don't see it again until Monday. And just having those intentional times where you detox from social, because it can be a lot. And I'm the same, like I know all of this stuff, and yet it's so easy to get pulled in.
Our brains, is as awesome as they might be, this technology is so great at looping us in. Like it's just so seductive to our chemistry. So I want to ask you about this one. So another ingredient here, a healthy relationship, inner relationship. We talked about building confidence and self-trust, taking time for yourself. You've got several others, but I want to hit on a couple more. One of them is giving your emotions a voice.
Yeah, well, they've shown in studies that if we just name our emotions, we feel more empowered. Like in raising children, if you can teach your child just to say, I'm feeling sad or I'm feeling angry, they feel more confident as a human being. So just naming our emotions gives us more empowerment. And I think it's kind of important to focus on that as adults, because most of us didn't get that education, that emotional intelligence training. And so most of us are still growing up our inner child. Right? Like we're learning as we go here. Like, for those of us who are parenting, we're creating a whole new story for new generations, but we're also learning as we go. And being able to feel the difference between a sensation in the body and an emotion is, again, it's another more self-aware, empowering tool for being present, right? Because we can go, okay, so I'm feeling, some tightness in my chest, I'm feeling like a little bit of heat in my stomach or in my face, and what I'm feeling is fear or anger or shame, and just being able to name that, and then being able to breathe through that and ask, like, okay, well, what does my body need right now in order to feel safe? Really tuning in deeper. Because so often when we're activated or when we're feeling big emotions, we do everything we can to offload them right away. A great example of this is driving. If you look at a lot of people driving, there's a lot of tension and anger and projection going on the road. People are honking at each other and swearing at each other and yelling, and it's just chaos. And you're just like, whoa, what's going on out here? Like, what's happening? And that's this offloading of energy rather than taking responsibility for what we're feeling internally. Right? Because we're so used to, especially in conflict, just blaming or, making it the other person's fault, or just like, take this energy, I'm just going to throw it at you so that I don't have to feel it, versus being centered and being like, okay, I'm actually feeling, angry or frustrated because I want to be heard, and here's what I'm actually trying to say, or here's what I actually need from you right now. And that takes maturity to be able to do that. And so none of us get it right all of the time, of course, but it's a practice.
Facts. And by the way, maturity is not denoted by age.
No.
That is an important realization for us to have, because we think, for example, once a child reaches a certain age, then they're legally able to do fill in the blank. That doesn't mean that they're mature enough to do something effectively or safely or intelligently, but that carries off deep into adulthood. We could be 60 years old still doing the same patterns as, we had when we were 12.
Yep.
Our same responses or our same, lack of being able to self-assess, whatever the case might be. So maturity is, again, not denoted by age. We can all get a little bit more mature and still have playfulness and, still have the childlike energy.
Yeah.
But I think even maturity can have a negative connotation because of that. Like, I don't want to be mature, it's just like maturity is being able to self-regulate.
Totally.
Yeah. And to be empowered. And another one of these ingredients, and this one right here, another ingredient for a healthy inner relationship with yourself is forgiving your past selves.
Yeah. I mean, so many of us are still punishing ourselves for the things that we've done in the past. We're not letting ourselves off the hook, or we're making ourselves too responsible. And this can happen when we're on the healing journey too, right? We're like, I'm going to take responsibility for my healing, and therefore I am, at fault for everything that happened to me. It can go into these, different degrees of extremism. And what we have to remember is that every single version of you brought you to where you are now. And that's such a blessing. What a gift to be in this time and have the capacity and the privilege to heal, right? Not everybody gets that opportunity. And so it's really an invitation to make the most of it and make the most of this life. If you're being invited to deepen in love and connection, that's a blessing. And we have to remember that every single, experience that we've had or a failure that we've endured, there was a lesson there. And so the best thing that we can do is to really, have our eyes open and be awake. And what was the lesson there? What was the medicine there? Is there somebody that I need to repair with? Do I just need to repair within myself and really honor those versions? We were doing the best that we could, right? Like if I look at my history, like, oh my goodness, the person that I was 20 years ago or, 15 years ago, when I'm just like coming out of this like street kid life, or, being in an abusive relationship where I'm just fighting to survive, that person said and did a lot of things, that I feel guilt for if I don't give myself permission to grow. If we can't see other people growing, for holding on to a stagnant version of themselves, that's really limiting. We have to do that in relationship too. It's like, how many people do you know who are married who think they know everything about their spouse or their partner? Like a good example would be, one time Ben and I were waiting outside of a sushi restaurant to pick up takeout, and then they gave her order, and there was something on the menu that she didn't recognize, and she said, there's no way this is my order. My husband didn't order that. He always orders this. And I get it. Like, we're used to our partner's patterns, of course. And so, I could have easily been that person. But what it taught me in that moment is how fixed we are on knowing a person and not expecting them to change.
Right.
So sometimes people change and then we don't even see it. And they've grown and they've transformed, and we're still holding on to that past version of them. And we do that to ourselves sometimes too, internally. So we've really got to practice that allowance and that being a witness to the transformation that's possible.
Yeah, this is so good. So good. This one is especially powerful because we imprison ourselves, really. We imprison ourselves. And, especially if you start, there's a like a trap door when you start working on yourself.
Yeah.
And you start pointing out and seeing all of those things from your past. And like you said, you can have guilt and shame around those things. That process of forgiveness, it's just like with, if you're forgiving someone else, let's talk about that too. Let's talk about that right after, this, but it is lifting a weight off of you. Like, we don't realize we're carrying around like an anchor, when we are judging ourselves so harshly and not understanding, this again extends to other people, that we did the best we could with the knowledge that we had at the time.
Yeah.
And with updated knowledge that we have now, looking back on past situations, that will create all kinds of negative emotions, and so just understanding that and being at peace with that, and also looking at the opportunity we have now, like, okay, because truly, like, a lot of this stuff, it ends up being a really good story, all the crazy stuff that we might have done or been through, and it's connective tissue for other people. But I want to ask you about this because some people can't even fathom forgiving someone who hurt them. Let's talk about that, forgiveness of others as being something necessary for ourselves.
Yeah, forgiveness is such a loaded topic, and what I like to remind people is that forgiveness is for you, not for them. Like, when we're holding on to resentment and to anger, it is physically destroying us. Like, it's actually hurting our health and it's hurting our psyche. And when we're holding on to anger and resentment and to the pain that we endured from the past, we can't open our hearts to the future. We can't trust love. We can't trust ourselves, because deep down we believe, there's something that we did to deserve that, or that, it's our fault. So we have to forgive ourselves and others. And there are times where acceptance is more of an accurate term. You know, there are some things that are hard to forgive. You know, like I wrote about this in my book actually, because I talk about forgiveness a lot. But, you know, when I look at my grandmother, who I barely know, but I know what she's done, you know, and I see her as someone who basically took away my mother's life with the abuse. It's hard for me to forgive that. I can accept it. I can accept that that happened, but it's really, really hard for me to forgive, you know. And so there are some of these moments where, you know, maybe we're going to be working on that pattern. You know, maybe there's like something in our lineage where we're going to be undoing that for a while. And we have to accept our reality in order to create something new, right? So if we're in resistance to reality, the story is not changing. And that's why it's so liberating to move through the anger, let ourselves feel it, let ourselves really unleash. You know, I have like a letter ritual in my book where you just write a letter and you say all the angry stuff and you can burn it or bury it. You have to move through the anger and let yourself feel that righteousness before you're ready to soften, right? We can't just bypass to softening, but eventually we need to get to this place where we're willing to reopen ourselves to love and to trust again. And that's ultimately why forgiveness is so important, right? Because we don't want to be stuck in that purgatory of our own hatred and our own pain forever. It's not a nice place to be. And the truth is we're actually giving those people more power, right? Because I see everything as energy. So the more time and energy I spend thinking about that person or sending them, you know, hate or anger, the more I'm feeding them. Versus, you know what, you don't deserve any more of my energy. You know, I'm going to move through this and I'm going to take my energy back. To me, that's just so much more empowering.
I'm mad right now. I'm just like, you know, I'm just wanting to pull back that energy that would go to whatever, you know, obviously a lot of people are angry right now as well.
Yeah.
It's an energy that's going out, and it's not that that's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
It's understanding that this is energy.
Yes.
And to maybe recalibrate that, invest the energy into something that you do want, you know, more of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's really left out of the conversation. We've done several shows and kind of pointing people in this direction. One of the great ones, we'll put it for folks in the show notes, was with Michael Beckwith, and having this conversation about okay, you're upset about how the world is right now. What do you want it to look like? If you had the opportunity to create the world in the way that you see fit, that serves all of us, what would that look like? Mm-hmm. Start to create that vision. Invest some of your time and energy in creating the vision of what your family would look like. Yeah. You know, what do you want your family life to look like? You know, and having the opportunity to do that, we have that capacity, and we're so powerful too. Once we get clarity on something, it's almost miraculous how stuff starts to happen in that direction. Mm-hmm. So, you know, this is so powerful, you know, and I love that you brought in acceptance as well, mm-hmm. because I think we can get caught up even in the label of the word forgiveness. Might be, you know, it might be too much.
Totally.
You know?
Sometimes it is.
A lot of words have a lot of energy behind them, you know, and so it doesn't have to be one flavor of the thing. I'm going to ask you about one more of these, which again, the book is just wonderful, and just bringing all these, like, just page after page, it's just like hitting things, experiences that I've had, and being able to give a voice to them. And another one of these for creating a healthy interrelationship is staying true to your values. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about that one.
Yeah, I mean, core values is a really fundamental piece of who we are. Right? If we know what we value, then we know what to say yes and what to say no to. And that reflects our environment, how we treat ourselves, how we treat other people, how our relationships to our bodies and to the planet look. It's everything. And so many of us don't ask ourselves, what do we value? We don't know. And so a lot of times in relationship, we're actually just behaving like animals, right? We like get turned on by somebody and then we pursue it because we feel turned on, right? We find somebody attractive and they turn a light on for us. And so we pursue that as if that's the end all be all. And entering into conscious relationship space, that might just be one piece, right? Of course, attraction and chemistry is important, right? We want to feel attraction and chemistry with our partner, but that's just one value, right? You know, sensuality or chemistry, that's one value. What about genuine authenticity, right? What about being integral and being kind, right? What about being disciplined or generous, right? Like, these are things that I know are important to me. They're probably important to you. And we all have different values. Some of us have, you know, high scientific values. Some of us have high spirituality values, religious values, right? And so if we're going to get clear on who we are as a person, then we can say, okay, well, you know, here's what I value. You know, what do you value? You know, and do these values align? Like, can we walk a path together, or is it not a match? And when we're doing more than just listening to our bodies get turned on, you know, when we're dating or in relationship, we're following more than just that roller coaster rush of emotions or that honeymoon phase. And then we're slowing down to enter this space of, like I said before, negotiation, where you can really get to know each other and negotiate a relationship and how that relationship's going to look, instead of just falling into it and hoping that it turns out the way you're imagining. You know, maybe you guys both have completely different realities of how relationships should look, but you didn't talk about that, you know? So it's important that we take that time. And so when we've gone through a cycle of breakups or relationship patterns that are exhausting for us, we want to return to the values and say, okay, well, what values was I prioritizing in that relationship? And for a lot of us, it's like something physical, you know, or, you know, there's like affection, you know, we value affection. And so maybe that was the only thing that was there, but there was all these other things in the way that made it an unhealthy relationship to be in. So what are the values that we prioritize? You know, what are we have to have these in order to have a relationship with someone, versus these are the nice to haves, or this is part of what makes me me, and I'm open to somebody who, you know, maybe doesn't share that value. It's really getting clear.
This one is probably the most practical of like help you to avoid drama in your life one, you know, but again, we tend to suppress that, you know, like our gut is just like, you know, they're not aligned with your values, you know, which, first of all, getting clear on what your values are, you know. So for me, if I value honesty and integrity, authenticity, honor, honor is, it's just, that word itself just like really resonates with me.
Yeah.
And I see, you know, maybe there's another couple that don't have those same values, like red flag alert. If we're still going to, you know, move forward in having them in our lives and they don't operate by the same, you know, the same value code, it's just a matter of time before, you know, some drama is going to happen.
Yeah.
Versus like you see that the value isn't aligned, you know, maybe it's honesty. Maybe it's honesty. You see some dishonesty behavior between them two, maybe not even, you know, with you directly. You're like, you know what, let me step away.
Yeah.
Instead of, again, acting like it doesn't happen. Stay true to your values. It's going to save you a lot of heartache and drama and, you know, dissonance, unnecessary dissonance later on.
Yeah.
So this one is super important and super practical.
And noticing when our values can get out of balance too. Like, I'll give you an example. One of my top core values is generosity. Like, I live by the rule of abundance. I love to give. I love to give to other people. I love to give money. I love to give gifts. I just want to give energy. And in my history, that core value, when out of balance, has turned into overgiving and caretaking. Right? So we also, knowing our core values, we can sometimes, if we're like, I don't know what my core value is, we can look at some of the ways that we get out of balance. And we say, oh, maybe I've been out of balance in that way because actually this is something that really matters to me. And how can I bring this value into balance so that it's more self-loving for me and the person on the other end can receive it in a healthier way, right? So it's actually looking at our relationship histories and our patterns and where we may have sort of fallen into a pattern that didn't feel quite aligned, where we can actually see, oh, these are the things that actually matter to me. Right? This is what drew me in because I care about that. And I know that I want that. And I want it to be also paired with respect, admiration, trust. Can't just have one.
This is so awesome. This is so good because our values can, for example, if my value is honesty, and I take that to an unhealthy extreme where I'm just out here honest with everybody, your feet are too big. Like you're a girl. Like how you wear a size 13 or whatever. Like I'm just being honest. Like that can go to an unhealthy place. Where I start to have harsh judgment for others. Or maybe I'm being hypercritical of myself. And all of these things, again, it's just having a healthy balance. Like that is my value, but I don't want to live it to the extent that I'm alienating myself and other people constantly. That's just ridiculous.
Absolutely.
So, and I've seen it happen before, and of course there are folks who do that. Like, they just say the thing, and they feel it's like an entitlement kind of like I could just say whatever I want, do whatever I want. But especially on the internet today, by the way,
Yes.
because in the real world you can get, you can face repercussions for that very quickly, especially where I'm from, And so there's a natural kind of weeding out of behavior like that. But on the internet, it's kind of activated some people's darkest sentiments of entitlement to where they can just say and do. And the crazy thing, and I know you've dealt with this, but like the sweetest, most incredible people just say the most wild to them. And it's just like, but and also here's the thing too, it exists in all of us.
Yep.
Like we are capable of the most heinous thing. We might think like, I would never take a life, for example. What if someone was trying to take the life of the person you cherish most in this world, and it was a choice?
Yeah.
Like we start to create a context where, hey, yeah, like the thing that I feel I would never do, there's a context where it's possible.
Yes.
And for us to understand that, and also understand, for me, I like to point people to, we are capable of the most beautiful, wonderful things as well. Even people who have these qualities that you might not agree with, they have so much beauty and potential in them as well, and it starts to create this unity, and so, but for that to even happen, we've got to be more mature.
Yep.
We've got to become the one.
Yeah.
And this is your book right here, Becoming the One. For everybody, pick up a copy like yesterday, and it's an experience to read. Like I feel like I know you so much better, and it's just exciting because I know that this is a book that we need right now, to work on ourselves, to be happy within ourselves. So before I let you go, what drove you? Because I know it's a compelling thing when you want to write a book. What compelled you to write this book right now?
Well, I've wanted to write a book since I could write. I've been writing since I was like 3 years old. But there was just something in me, and it happened, I think I started writing about a year and a half ago now. There was just something in me that felt it was time. And what I didn't realize was that when I said yes to the book deal, it wasn't going to feel the way that I thought I was going to feel. It was such an initiation. I was so confronted because it means so much to me. Writing is my art. It's how I connect with spirit, and it's how I tell stories, and it's healing for me too. So it was a really intense process. I spent about 6 months just sort of in the liminal space, getting ready. And the reason that I wanted to write this is because I know what it's like to live with a closed heart. I know what it's like to be terrified, to be vulnerable. I know what it's like to not trust love. I was like afraid of men until I was like 17 years old because of my history. So, and I also know the beauty on the other side. I am living this life with this amazing partner and this wonderful, family member, this pet family member, and, feeling so connected to my community and to the land that feeds me. And I want that experience for everyone, because I think we don't realize how short life is, or that it's actually really the only thing that matters in the end is love. Like, I genuinely pray that every single person who has the desire will experience love and family in some form in this life. So I think that's really what we need to get back to. And I wanted this book to be an opening for that, and to have other people see themselves in my stories, to feel like they're not alone.
Hey, if you like this video, make sure to check out this video right here.
As painful as it is sometimes, through pain comes growth. And my life mission is to grow and to help people want to do the same thing.